I have to hit a button? No, it's already recording. It's already done.
All right, online community. We are live from Tampa. We've never done this before, so I don't know how it's going to work logistically, but for those of you tuning in online, we're glad to have you with us. We're here live with Mike Grover. Mike, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, we've got a couple guys watching live. We're going to put the recording out there.
It's my birthday party.
It's his birthday today, 59 years old. We got a room full of people that Mike's going to be talking to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn things over to Mike, and this is a roundtable just like we do virtually every week. So if you have a question to ask, Mike's going to talk for about 20 minutes or so. He and his wife Cheryl are here. Cheryl, you want to say hi?
Hi.
Millions of people are watching live.
Yes.
Not really, but it could be. You never know. Mike's going to do his talk, and I'm just going to put the camera on Mike. And if you have a question, when we go to the questions, we're going to be taking live questions in here in this room for the virtual roundtable. If you have a question, throw it in the chat. The only announcements I've got is we're live here today. We're going to be live from Chicago next week. We've never done it this way, and if it goes well today, we may be able to do it next week. So we're excited about that. I'm going to kick it over to Mike. Thanks for hosting us today, Mike.
Okay. Man, so this is a session that I'm really excited about doing. Cheryl and I have been married 26 years, and we have 4 kids, 2 by birth and 2 by coming into our home at 10 and 12 years old. So we have right now how old's Jesse? 30, 28, 23, and 20. And they're all unique. They're all different. 3 girls, 1 boy, and completely different. We had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And then we went from having a 4-year-old, a 1-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 12-year-old. And so we were living in 2 different worlds super, super quickly. But the reality is, you know, any of us that have kids know they're different. They're different from the womb. I mean, Annabeth was a wild girl in the room. It was like alien trying to get out of the sack. You know, she'd be pushing out. Juliana, you know, she's asking me these deep theological questions at 2 years old, you know. CJ, we'll just go there. But anyway, just so many different things. But we did a parenting seminar in the fall, Friday night and a Saturday here at our church. And really one of the sessions we really dug into, and this is kind of the basis we're moving from, is the things that trigger or provoke our kids. You know, it says in Ephesians 6:4, provoke not your children to wrath. And then over in Colossians 3:21, fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. And so, you know, parenting our kids can feel tough to us, but it's tough to them too. And I think, you know, the way we approach them, the way we understand their uniqueness and their individuality is so much a part of shepherding their hearts. One illustration that jumps out the clearest to me, which I just feel like it was a wisdom from God. Annabeth, you know, as I said, she was just feisty from day one. You know, Annabeth was the little girl with the, you know, Cinderella dress on, climbing up a tree with a Spider-Man action figure, you know, in her hand. And she came to me one day in tears and said, Daddy, Daddy. I said, what's wrong? She goes, I like Spider-Man. I said, that's okay, hon. She goes, but I'm a girl. And so had to talk her through that, you know, it's okay. But God really, I think very early on, you know, for both of us, but especially me as her dad, really helped me to see that I really needed to have a super, super close relationship with her if I would probably survive her teen years with her. Because Aunt Juliana, it's all about the rule. You say this is the rule. Juliana's 23 years old. She's a CPA and she's got it together and it's the rule. She's doing the rule. Annabeth, man, you know, she'll come in and just, it's common. I'll be sitting there in the morning. She'll come in and plop a Bible down in front of me and say, this here, women remain silent. I don't like that, you know, why? What does that mean? And but she's always been like that. And so for her heart, I've just had to have a really good friendship with her because it was the relationship that was going to get us through the teen years. Rules were never going to work with Annabeth. Juliana, she was it's the right thing to do. My fear with Juliana, it's the good girl who becomes an adult and all of a sudden goes off the deep end. And so I'd ask her all the time as a teen, Juliana, are you going to do that? And just kind of have those open conversations.
And she didn't, by the grace of God.
She didn't. But so the point really we want to talk about today and really get some discussion, and this is a roundtable, so we're going to kind of get it going, and then we really want everyone to be able to learn from each other. And I know conversations like this can sometimes bring guilt because maybe you said, man, I should have started that back then. But I always look at, the opportunity you have to influence others, the opportunity you have. For us, it was a lot of apologizing with the 10-year-old and 12-year-old. We had no idea what we were doing. And with CJ in particular, we felt like, there was some wounds in his life that probably we had inadvertently caused. And so we sat down with him in his 20s and just did some real apologizing. And it's been a really good thing. And so that's what we're going to try to do here today. So just we're going to review some of the things we felt that were hindrances in shepherding the heart, and then probably go off of them. So we'll run through them and then we'll go to the question time. So first of all, we're going to talk about is hypocrisy in our lifestyles, right? My stepfather was, he'd come home, case of beer, pop open a beer, light up a cool, and tell me not to smoke and drink beer. And I thought, well, works for him, it's going to work for me. And it was like, I never respected what he was saying to me because his attitude was, don't do what I'm doing, do what I'm saying. And so I know for me as a parent and even as a pastor, what we run into in pastors' wives, we have to have, this expectation from people publicly that if we're not careful could maybe come across to our kids as hypocrisy. And so one of the lessons we learned early on is tell on yourself publicly and tell on yourself often. So your kids will know at least you're honest, and that I think has worked. Cheryl's dad, on the other hand,
my dad would tell me, if you see me doing something I told you not to do, respectfully call me out on it. And I tried to practice that with our children. If I've asked you not to or told you not to do something and you see me doing it, you can make me aware of it.
Yeah, Cheryl's mom's over here, and this is her sister Brenda, and there's a whole tribe of them,
Yes.
brothers and sisters.
Tribe is a good word.
But we grew up so differently. I like to say my family was all prisoners, hers were all pastors, and so, but a lot of truth to that. But anyway, so that's kind of that part, thinking about that hypocrisy, being honest. And I think that's the thing. I think our kids will forgive so much in us when they see we're honest. They don't expect us to be perfect. And it's a real mistake to teach them perfection, because if you're teaching your kids perfection, you're actually setting them up for failure, right? So we have a saying in our church, and if I start it, the church will finish it. It's not perfection, it's direction. And we'll say that, and because, it's growth, it's grace. And so, and that really is the second thing. Another thing that really provokes children is unnecessary rules, and not no rules at all, obviously. Unnecessary rules. One of the great pieces of wisdom we got from a mentor in our life, Charles Shoemaker, was say yes as often as you can. Don't look for reasons to say no. Look for reasons to say yes.
As a matter of fact, I remember a time Annabeth wanted to get red tips in her hair. She was just
Young teenager.
Yeah,
She wanted to get
13.
crazy.
And she wanted red tips. And I said, I don't think Dad's going to go for that, but you go ask Dad. Well, she went and asked Dad, and he said yes. And I was like, why'd you say yes? He said, it's temporary.
I said, well, what I said is I had a tattoo when I was 13. The red hair will come out. That's what I said.
But she had her red tips for days, and then she was ready to get it cut off. She didn't want it anymore.
Yeah.
It didn't last long, did it?
It's really funny because of our upbringing difference. Cheryl is just a very good girl. I got saved when I was 20 in the military, and so different. And she'll be so upset with our girls and like the world's falling, and I'll just be watching, smile and say, honey, you know why you have the luxury to be upset over their messy room? I said, because they're not on drugs, they're not pregnant. And then she'll get mad at me for a little while, but she knows it's the truth.
It's the truth.
And I'm looking at them thinking, man, they are light years ahead of where I was, you know. I got off probation when I was 18, and you know, you're worried about their room being messy, so not worried about that. Perspective.
Yes.
Unnecessary rules. One of the things I love, Cheryl and I met in our 30s, and we had our first child. I was 35, you were 36, or 36, 37, somewhere around that. But one of the things about that, we had babies when some of our kids, our friends' kids, were 17 years old. And I had just watched some of the things they made such a big deal about that meant nothing.
Right.
And you know, if you keep your powder dry on the important issues that you really need to speak into, what you're doing is you're really leveraging your credibility with your kids.
Yeah, everything's a big deal, nothing's a big deal.
Yeah,
You know,
if every,
it's all
you know,
like this.
yeah, so definitely, you know, is there anything, and one of the things happened, CJ, I mentioned when he was about 19, CJ had a lot of hurt in him that we didn't recognize from abandonment issues. And it really didn't come out till he was about 19. He went to college, Bible college, which I thought he should stay home another year and not go, just really unraveled. And I always knew CJ would struggle. I always felt like he'll probably get fired from 20 jobs because he always knows the right way to do it, which, by the way, he runs his own business. And so that's good for CJ to work for himself. But there's some things with substance abuse I never thought he would get into just because of the example in our family. And he did. It really caught me off guard. And so I remember sitting down with our girls, and they were middle teens at the time. And I said, you know, is there anything we believe or rules that we have that you guys just totally disagree with? Let's talk about it. Let's get, you know, you don't believe in the deity of Jesus Christ. You don't understand it. You're struggling with your identity. And I've talked to both of our girls. Our girls are 23 and 20, and Juliana, I don't know if she's ever dated anyone. You know, she's been in school a lot, loves hanging out with her friends. And so as a dad of two girls who never had the benefit of threatening their boyfriends because they didn't have any as teenagers, they just never, I remember sitting down and asking them, do you girls, you know, this might sound weird, but are you interested in boys? Is this something we're going to have a conversation about? Because nowadays, right? And so you want to put it on the table, but the one thing that Annabeth was really upset with, and we're going back now 8 years, is she wasn't allowed to wear pants to church. And that was back when that was maybe a bigger thing in our mind. Well, it was a thing in our mind at that point, still somewhat kind of on the peripheral, but it was still there. And we just kind of looked at each other and were like, why? And that was the end of that, you know? So that was Annabeth. Juliana,
she wanted to spend the night.
She wanted to spend the night outside the home with her friends more often than we let her. And so that was it, you know? And so we made that a regular pattern of, is there any rules we have? Are there any beliefs we have that you guys are questioning? You know, let that be right in the front. Don't let it be something that shocks you when they become adults. Because, you know, once your kids, and that's one of the things, I don't know how far we'll get to it, is adapting our parenting style through the different stages of life. You know, once your kids are adults, you really have to be invited into their issues, right? And there are way more scary issues in adulthood than they are at teen years, because you still have the authority to step in and pull the brakes. Whereas they're 18, you legally have nothing, you know? And so establishing that and being able to shepherd them through hard and bad decisions while you still are that, we just found that to be totally invaluable with us, with our kids, been so important. So let's move on. Constant negativity. And I think this goes a lot with the unnecessary rules. You know, I thought about the first commandment of scripture. Anybody know what it is? Of every tree of the garden, you what? You may freely eat. It was a positive one. But of the tree of knowledge, good and evil, you should not eat of it. And the day you eat, you'll surely die. And I thought about that. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was watching a social media post by a couple of people who had attended our church in the past and were in different churches. And I would have felt that some of the reasons they left were inconsequential in the big scope of things, but there were things that were really important to them. And they would be, I'd view them as people who would see themselves as Bible believing people. And one of the things that hit me, this just yesterday morning, was they believe the Bible where it tells them no, but they don't believe the Bible where it tells everyone else yes. And the silence of Scripture is yes. And so they were okay with the Bible. Anywhere it would say no, they loved the Bible. They were all about the Bible. But where the Bible said yes or didn't say no, which by implication was a yes, they just wrestled. They were okay with the Bible teaching them no, but they weren't okay with it telling everyone else yes. And I think we can get into that mindset with our kids of this constant negativity. This is a no, and that's a no. And I believe that is stirring them up. That is provoking them to wrath. Particularly if you have, just like a Juliana, a rule-keeping child, because she's going to do what we tell her. And, I was the dean of students at Trinity for about 9 years. And, early on, you're always making up a new rule for everything. If you've been in a Christian college atmosphere, there's the new rule of the week, right? My brother-in-law went to Pensacola and he used to make grilled cheese on an iron in his room and sell them. And so I think they created a rule, no grilled cheese, no cooking on irons in your room or something. He lasted like one semester there. Keith was not cut out for that kind of environment. Christian college was not his thing. He is on a church staff and has been for years, but he just didn't have that kind of boundary. But I got an anonymous note from a student. It said, you can change this rule, but all you're doing is punishing the people who are going to keep it. So just know the people you're punishing are the ones that want to do the right thing. That just changed my whole view of things and really saying yes, So there's clear no's that we want to have, but when you make up, you're provoking, you're creating inner tension. If it's a no that is clear and you shouldn't, well, then you just kind of can't adjust that. But there's so many things that we can. This is a good one, huh? Number 4, attacking identity rather than behavior.
Exactly. I think it's important. I made the mistake of attacking identity instead of behavior, but it's important to tell them when they do something wrong. I don't like what you did. Not you're awful. You're crazy. You're dumb. What's wrong with your head?
You never.
You never.
You
do
always.
This. You always. Yes.
Yep. It's behavior's behavior. And I think if we attack behavior as if it's part of their identity, it's really a rejection of who they are. I don't think any parent that loves their kids wants to reject them. We want to nurture who they are. We want to disciple them. We want to lead them to be the best that Jesus wants for them. But when it's about identity, when we attach our correction to their identity rather than their behavior, we actually may be reinforcing the belief that it's something that can't change. It's just the way I am. I've seen that a lot and found that very helpful in dealing with people dealing with same-sex attraction, is making it about the behavior, not identity. And even in college, it was amazing to me when I was working at college how much people would open that door to me and that were struggling with this that you'd never see. But when you made it about the behavior rather than identity, it almost was so much more easy to help and work with.
And even in that showing a lot of grace to your to your children when they mess up, because what happens is when you mess up, they in turn show grace to you.
Yeah, like, why are you always so rebellious?
Yeah.
You
never pick up your shoes.
Versus, we need to work on your obedience. I read a great book. Most of the book was great. It was a parenting book by a guy named Sorensen, a pastor. And he had things in there that I wouldn't agree with, but there was a lot I did. And he talked about the 3 pillars of parenting. Obedience was one of them, truth was another one, and respect. We always obey, we always tell the truth, we always show respect. Think about it, everything is one of those 3 things, right? So you deal with, really, what do we parent? 3 things: obedience, respect, and honesty. And everything else really works into that, and I'm talking about behavior and morality here, not so much talking about their relationship with Christ. That proceeds out of that relationship.
I wanted you to tell about the big deal you made with Juliana the first time she lied to you.
Oh yeah, that was a good one. she was probably 5, and she was in the back of our new minivan with her little friend Bethany.
Yeah.
And they had crayons and they colored on the back of the back bench seat. And I opened the back of the van for something. And I saw it and I said, Juliana, did you and Bethany? And she said, no. And as far as I know, she told me that's the only time she's ever lied to me, but she may be lying.
I don't think she's lying.
But I just made her feel like at that moment, like I said, I can't believe you lied to me. You're breaking my heart. I have never lied to your mother. She would never lie to me. You know why? Because we love each other too much not to always tell her. So I made lying. It's like, it was murder. And so as far as she says, and I asked Annabeth if she ever lied to me, but she wouldn't answer me. She just kind of rolled her eyes and moved on. But I kind of tend to believe Juliana, you know?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, she doesn't say a lot though,
No.
so she could just not be telling me. But just that identity, you know, building our kids up in who they are is so important to shepherding their heart, right? And I know I'm stating all these things that trigger them, but if you think about them, the flip side are all those things that build them up, right? Is that so? Here's one. I think anyone that's honest can see this is harshness toward mirrored behaviors. You ever notice it's the thing in your kid that's like you that drives you crazy? I'll see her and Annabeth going at it. And I'm just sitting there with the popcorn because they're literally, the thing that's driving them crazy is them. But if I say it, they'll turn their guns on me, you know? So.
It's like the time I told Annabeth, quit bossing dad, and I had just bossed.
Yeah. So, or I said something, yeah, but mirrored behaviors, you know, the things you say, whether it's stubbornness, right? You know, whether it's having you know, cranky disposition. Sarcasm. Yeah, I have the gift of sarcasm. So, and Annabeth, my daughter, calls me Mike, and I know that probably drives some of you crazy. She'll say, hey, Mike. She goes nuts. I could care less. It was just kind of a fun thing we did. She liked doing it with her friends. I actually became a TikTok celebrity with her friends. I pull up to drop her off one day and all these kids come up, hey, it's Mike, it's Mike. I'm like, how do they know me? Because she'll do these little videos of me around the house doing stuff and all her friends watch it, you know? But sometimes, you know, the sarcasm, the things you do, your kids mirror that. And I can remember, like, because I don't know anyone in the world I'm mad at or bitter at. I literally get over things so quickly. But I can really rise fast, right, Andrew? Andrew was a student at Trinity when I was there, but he wasn't the godly man he is today. But anyway, and
we've all matured.
Yes, we've all matured. But I can elevate super quickly. And then I catch myself, and then I gotta go pick up the broken pieces of people's lives behind me.
Or then he gets calm and acts like nothing ever happened.
Yeah,
I'm like,
everyone's whining around me, bleeding, you know, putting a tourniquet on their wound. I'm like, what? But Annabeth can elevate real high. A lot of my stories are Annabeth stories because Juliana doesn't, she doesn't let you really see what's going on as much. But anyway, so just, you know, why do you see the speck that's in your brother's eye, but you don't notice the log that's in your own eye? That's a good parenting verse right there, isn't it? And so we see that. And then, you know, just kind of quickly, absolutism instead of explanation in older kids. Now, when kids are young, in our experience, it's pure totalitarianism. It's absolutism. They don't need a reason. It's because you're teaching them things that are probably going to save their life. There comes a point where you've got to start answering the whys. And so when you aren't willing to move into that level of parenting in those teen years, our experience is you're just shutting them down.
I remember a day when Annabeth, I was serving Mike a plate of food.
It's a good one.
And I don't think anything of it, that I'm doing the example.
I just snap my finger, she brings me stuff. It's the way it is.
But I love to serve and I enjoy serving Mike. And so she said, Mom, I have a question for you. And I was like, okay. You know, and she's like, are you fixing Dad a plate of food because it's scriptural, it's traditional, it's cultural, what is the reason behind that? I just need to know.
This is biblical.
Yeah, is this biblical? And I said, well, the Bible does say by love, serve one another. She said, but does it say for the wives to serve their husbands a plate of food? You know, and she wanted to know why I did that. And she said, because I need to know, because if I get married, do I need to do that?
You know what you said? You said to her no, and she said, good, because I'm not going to do that. That's exactly what she said. And she's got in her mind, she's going to marry a guy who cooks because she doesn't want to. So, but you know, giving reasons to things like that, and her not just climbing all over her. How could you ask such a question? This is the right thing to do, and this is the godly thing to do, and I can't believe, you know, that's just going to close it up, right? And then you're just shutting them down. So absolutism. And then the last one, they are failure to progress with them through the stages of parenting. You know, you got those early years, which are big boundary years. And then really you kind of move more into, you know, kind of more like an apprenticeship, you know, it's kind of side by side. You're still the boss, you're still in charge, but you're kind of moving into more of a giving more freedom, giving more liberty, allowing certain things that are reasonable. And then really, I think the adult years, to me, it becomes more of a friendship existence. And like I said earlier, you have to be invited into adult problems. And it's really scary seeing your kids with the potential of decisions that could cause so much damage. And you know, it's their decision to make. And so if you're not progressing with them through these seasons and changes, you may have just shut yourself out of probably the season in their life where your word's going to be most valuable to them. And you have to be invited into that. And so, you know, I've seen kids who have been parented and raised with such dominance and such a strong hold on them that they're looking for that time when, you know what, I can do it and you can't tell me I can't do it. But if you're shepherding their heart through those seasons, when those consequential decisions of adulthood are coming, when you have to be invited into your kids' issues, man, the door's open and you'll be so thankful you behaved in a way with your kids where they trusted you to have that input into there. So
a lot of talk has been talked about Annabeth today, but I wanted to say that learning to be a good listener is important and not always doing the talking. And Annabeth, the last few weeks has gotten to where she'll come home from class or work or whatever it may be, hanging out with her friends, and she'll just come in the house looking for me, which is unusual. And she'll just tell me everything that went on or what went on or what was good or what was bad, or this bothered me, or I had this coming up I'm stressed about, or I had so much fun with my friends.
she'll be 21 in July. So she's a student at University of South Florida and works. She was the little girl, the short one running the cafe. That's my 20-year-old. So, and she runs our church cafe and all the volunteers, the whole crew. And man, she's like the soup Nazi, you know, don't look her in the eyes. Don't look, if anyone's familiar with Seinfeld, you know, that's our joke with Annabeth. Don't look her in the eyes. Don't look her in the eyes. Put your money on the counter and move down. And yeah. But so anyway, that's, you know, that's like some lessons we have learned, and just kind of, you know, thoughts or questions about that. You know, what have you kind of picked up? First of all, how many of you have adult children? You had a son just got married, right? Okay, I saw that. Adult children. Okay. How many of you got teenagers? Okay. Elementary age still? Okay. Yeah. All right. So we got a pretty good representation. So how many, I'd like to start, you got those adult kids. How many have experienced that, happen to be invited in and working back from that? Something you could share about that you guys kind of experience, or one of the things you see now that would inform the earlier parenting differently based on where you are now? I'm putting you on the spot.
I think I have a lot of friends that have kids the same age and are just slightly behind. And I think you have to respect, especially I have boys. So there even has to be, I feel like, an even stronger level of respect for them as a man and their desire to move forward in manhood. And when you're a strong mom, that's kind of, you have to really take a step back and let them be strong men and women too. I mean, I would assume, but in our case, to allow that for me, was a big transition. And to be able to then turn around and allow, kind of say that same thing to other people, that you have to be invited in. And, but it's true, and you have to work through it to get there. But, I mean, it's hard. That period was hard. That transition was hard from child to man, or I would think, and that's, I'm a very strong mom who likes to control things.
Yeah.
And I had to let go of a lot of that, but it's easier the second time and it's easier the third time.
I think seeing that early, one statement that we were told that has been gold to us, and we heard this early with our parenting, is you're not raising kids, you're raising adults. And view what you're doing as prepping them for later, because there's tendency in parents, we can think of our role as to feed and protect and shelter. But no, it's preparation, because they're going to be adults. They're going to live as adults way longer than they'll ever live as children. And so we are raising, you're bringing up adults, you're not raising kids. So that's kind of right there, releasing them. So you have adult children and you have elementary?
Yes, so my oldest one's about to be 19. She is actually going to PCC this fall. She's incredible though. She's a rule follower, very easy to get along with, and just a really, really good, strong Christian young woman. But it was a little bit different with the transition. I'm going to talk to you about the boy thing. I think it was a little encouragement there.
To me, the boys way harder than the girls were, in my experience.
My girls are so easy, and my boys, that is a different situation. And I am that mama bear, and anyway. But with my daughter, it has been easy because she's very open. We have a really good relationship. But there are things that she, might not be ready to talk about or say something to me about. And I have had to learn to respect that and give her space, because she might be trained to come to, no, is this what I should do or not do? Or is this right or is this wrong? Or, whatever. She's got to process that as an adult, making her own decisions now. And so it has been different, like taking a step back. But it's also been good. She's been a good one to practice on. Now with my son, it's a different story.
Yeah, well, that was one of the benefits of us bringing a 10-year-old and 12-year-old into our home when we only had a 1 and a 4, because we got to practice on them. And our girls really benefited from poor CJ and Jessica.
And we remind CJ and Jessica.
And we thank them all the time for the parenting experience they gave us, and forgive us for our many failures. Yeah, no, that's great. So, Drew, you got teenager now, right? So a little different. What do
I was
you?
always a rule follower. Right.
You were never a rule follower. Drew. False.
I was clearing my throat.
Yes,
We
yes.
have a 15-year-old daughter, and she takes after her whole life. She's
Anna was a.
absolutely perfect. She sets like screen limits on her phone. It's incredible. And then our youngest daughter will never have a phone.
Yeah, I think God gives you that easy one, so you can kind of have more reserve for the other. Yeah.
So
Okay. All right. Did we get any questions?
Yeah, we had a question coming online. So have you had a kid or a teen regress in an area that maybe they had victory in, like in your example, lying? If so, how did you deal with that? Any kind of regression that you've had with a particular kid in parenting?
And, I would say probably Juliana, probably the least. And like I said, Juliana keeps her cards close. She's my 23-year-old. She lives on her own, lives nearby us. Very committed follower of Christ, leads worship over at Sefner campus. She's the one finished her CPA license at 23 years old. She just got it together. So she's like, the Virgin Mary, I don't know. She's got the halo. But I would say for me, CJ's 28 years old, and CJ we got when he was 10 years old, came to live with us, and mother was in prison for 7 years, so experienced a lot of rejection that really came pouring out at 19 years old that we didn't see coming. With him, I would say it's been a lot more of a seesaw, a back and forth, 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards. He's 28 now. He's married, has 2 children. Really, I would say it was at 27, 28 years old where I started seeing a real consistency coming in him. So I've dealt with it, but the main thing we could say is you gotta stay there with them. You gotta stay in the game with them. You gotta, be available. We had to learn when it wasn't our lane to say things to CJ anymore. And we just had to love him anyway, even though he was, totally not where we would want him to be. But the biggest thing probably with CJ, and, if there's a parenting provoking in it that I mentioned earlier, is we had to have a sit down where we apologized to him for really some of the mistakes we felt like in not understanding how to parent a preteen teenager when we were still the parents of a 5 and a 6-year-old. So I think it's that, once again, I think it's that honesty, that openness, transparency, keep speaking into their life, keep loving them, keep praying for them, keep believing that, that stability is going to come in their life. And that's just what we experienced from it. So anyone else have something like that? Just, okay.
Quick question. You said earlier, and I love how you said this, but you said when your kids were in their mid-teens, you asked them if there was a rule that you had or a belief that you had that they would disagree with to get that feedback. My kids, my son is 4, my daughter turns 3 tomorrow. So they're still probably a little bit young to be asking that question. When would you start asking questions like that?
To me, it's around those preteen years where, at each stage, when you have a baby and then one day you look at them and they're not a baby, and you have a little kid and one day you look at them, they're not a little kid. You don't see it till after it happens. You see when your kids become preteen, right? They're not, they're a little more cool about you being around, I would say it's at that point, because I feel like in the formative years up till around that, let's say 12, 13 years old, to me, it's all about establishment. It's totalitarianism to me. But now it's coaching, right? Now it's apprenticeship. Now it's mentoring. And so for us, it was, just regularly having that conversation, it was about belief and it was about behavior. What do we believe that you struggle with? What do we believe you wrestle with? And like I said, the goal was to get it out on the table early so we could disciple them through those questions rather than being shocked by them when they became 20 years old. And we asked, what happened? What happened is we never talked to them. We made a lot of assumptions about their beliefs and behaviors. So I'd say 12, 13. Yeah. And, it's like if you get your kids to help you, you're moving some boxes and you got a 5-year-old wants to help daddy, you hand them one book, you don't hand them a box of books, right? So just getting age appropriate, give them more weight. I love the verse in the scripture where it talks about let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. The idea is carrying the burden on your own shoulder. And so there's a measure of giving your kids that burden to carry completely on their own. But I think starting pre-adolescent right around there is probably a good time more than anything. Unless you have one of those kids that are just very perceptive younger, you got to look at them individually. So, okay.
Is that something you would bring the younger kids in on if you have those kind of adolescent kids?
See, I didn't experience that because, like I said, when I had that aha moment with CJ as an adult, that just shocked me. Our girls were 3 years apart, our girls.
Yes.
And so they were both already in that early mid-teen. So I didn't have that experience, but I think it's the nature, the level of the conversation, and today we have to have depending on, the situation, your kids, where they're at school, friendships, things like that. There's conversations we all don't want to have. We find ourselves, parents today, having to really deal with things much earlier.
And we don't act shocked
unfortunate.
about anything they ask, because Annabeth has asked anything, and Julie, Annabeth has asked anything.
Annabeth has asked questions where Cheryl has immediately left the room.
So, but it could be anywhere from race to anywhere from the deity of Christ, like Mike said, Trinity, anything. Even
Dad,
though we've been teaching.
Here's a big Annabeth one. Okay, I'll just tell it. Dad, how people are always saying, boys just want to have sex. Girls struggle with that too, Dad, and they need to be. I was like, Beth, I don't want to have this conversation. And the Cheryl just kind of disappeared on it. But that's Annabeth. She's gonna, which I'm glad we have the conversation rather than, the follow-up. So, all right, man, good stuff. Anyone else? Come on, some of you parents, you've done a great job. You got a son that just got married. I mean, brought him to that place. Is that a good experience? I haven't had a child. It's hard.
It's my only boy, the oldest, and then I have 4 girls.
Oh, wow.
And we do have a fantastic relationship with that. Just learning to let go of it is.
Yeah. Especially a mom and boy, that bond, it seems that's a special thing. Dad and girls.
And he was moving out while we're here, so.
Oh.
So, yeah. My daughter's in the picture, I know.
Oh. Oh my, oh my. Well, that's a tough season.
No, it's a very good thing. I know we raised him for this, and he's picked a lovely life. He's
That's
just
awesome.
Such a joy to raise.
Mhm.
It's just fun.
Okay, Josh, I saw you were a road trip with your son, taking him across the coast to other side to Liberty. Dad to son, what was that experience of feeling like you did it? It was the right.
Yeah.
You were able.
Glad to get rid of them.
Okay, so what if it had been one of your daughters? Yeah. Okay.
No, yeah, it was fun. It was a fun experience, and mom, Alana is sisters with my wife, and so they talk every day. But would you say it's probably harder on Heather than?
Oh, yeah, this mom thing.
Yeah.
I have 3 boys. Heather has
Yeah.
Jonathan, and it's hard.
I think it's a dad, girl, mom, boy thing.
Is it?
I think
I mean,
for
I'm
me.
still sitting there, I'm just so proud, like, oh man, he made it, and he's out, he's like living a life, and he's enjoying the program.
ROTC.
Yeah, ROTC, history department, and focused on Army service, so, yeah, he's loving that, and so there's a pride, I think, that I hold that Heather is like, kind of, there's a bitterness there, and I only feel the sweetness of it,
Wow. How would you, my girl's only 2.5.
Okay.
How would you begin to prepare yourself for that moment?
Well,
Where you begin to, because like you said, this is where I've been taught
yeah.
as I watch mentors above me, they say, like you mentioned, you're raising adults,
Uh-huh.
you're not raising kids. That's always been the idea as I start coming to this parenting is, my daughter, I'm raising an adult, and everything I do and all the standards we set, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, it's for these moments. You want to see them go on and have the pride and the flourishment of their life and their ownership of their faith. How would you take start as a 2-year-old and starting to progress toward that?
First thing is the awareness that you need to, obviously. I remember, I guess we loved watching the original Wonder Years series. And there's one episode where the older sister marries this guy and moves to Alaska. I had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I'm sitting there bawling, watching it, thinking of the day when my girls are going to forsake me and move to Alaska. I was ready for them to go to, the Yukon territory or something. But for me, it's that awareness. And I think that was how old are you?
31.
Okay, so late 20s, first child. Okay, so I was 36 when our first was born. For me, it was a little easier because I saw people already do it. I knew it was coming. And so I just think I just always kept it in mind, that there was always whatever I was dealing with, the immediate was really never going to be detached from the future. And I wouldn't say it's like every single moment, like there's perfection and this purism in it. But it was just a constant reminding yourself of that awareness. And I think it's just trusting God. And, so much of it is just the Lord, right? People say, well, you did a great job with your kids. How many parents wouldn't just say it was the Lord? Because certainly it's not us, but the awareness of it. What would you say is a how-to on that, with the girls and getting them ready for adulthood for you?
For me?
Yeah, just just kind of in your experience with it.
Well, I think one thing that my dad had 8 kids and raised us all and told us later in life, I was good at raising kids. I was not good at raising adults.
He had a hard
So
time letting
it made
release
me-
him.
Because I tended to be more like my dad. And it made me more aware. Like I would take, he already referred to it, but I would be more like, I would be the stricter parent, or I would be the one that held a little tighter. So it made me constantly aware that I had to keep myself in check with that, with everything.
Who's the stricter, you or your wife?
Life.
Okay. So you'll naturally always be balancing each other out with that. Okay. I would have always thought I would have been the stricter parent until I married her, and then I was the liberal. And so, yeah. But any thoughts on that? Prepping your kids for adulthood? Anyone else input on that?
I don't know if it goes directly related to that, but we're talking about having boys. So I have 3 boys, and like what you were saying, you're kind of like chill with Jonathan, because you're like, yeah, he's there, he's gonna make it, because you're a man and you've been in Jonathan's head. And for the mom, like Heather and I talk about this all the time, it's like, we are terrified because we're not in a man's head. And so we see, you know, we're gonna struggle with all these things and what's gonna leap out there and grab them and, you know, all of these things, where my husband is more relaxed, like my oldest son, and I'm like, you know.
How old is he?
He's 16.
Oh, yeah.
And he's total opposite of me. My second born, he and I, like, we get each other. And so I like gripping, because I'm like, is he gonna love God? Is he gonna be even a good citizen? You know, it's boring in there, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
No, he's a great kid, but my husband relates because he's like Atlanta. When I was a teenager, like, you have no idea like what I was, and like you married me way later, and my frontal lobe developed.
Thank God for that frontal lobe coming along.
But I think that's so important. It has helped me so much having my husband.
balance of
speak
it,
into that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm perfect and arrived and
Mhm.
I'm on my knees a lot, but just having that, like, okay, take a breath, you know, it's okay. I was a teenage boy. I thought these things, and the Holy Spirit, like my husband's from a family of 10. They all serve the Lord. I mean, they're all in ministry. There are a couple of them are laymen, but they're heavily involved in the church. And you ask his parents, my in-laws, you know, what did you do? How did this happen to get 10 children that love God? And they don't know. It was the grace of God. Like, of course, there's things that we can point to when family was everything, God was the center. But we just can never negate it. The Holy Spirit is working overtime for my children way more than I ever did. And that has given me a peace in these teen years.
Wow, that's great. So just that kind of partnering between husband and wife on those issues. Now, my mother-in-law is sitting here, and she's one of my favorite people on the whole planet. Raised 8 children, all serving the Lord in different capacities, missionaries, pastors, pastors' wives, music ministry. And they had a little advantage because my father-in-law was an evangelist, so they lived on a bus a huge part of their life. And that's why my wife's only 4'11". It's the goldfish bowl effect, so she didn't have much room to grow. Yeah. So what would you say, Mom? You're listening to all this and preparing our kids. You did a good job. What do you say? What would you attribute to when someone
We
would?
had a good father. We had a good father.
Yeah.
He was very, very strict. Had to be, I mean, to be on the road all the time, 10 of us in a bus. He was very strict, but he was a man of God. He was no phony. And he was very, very strict, but quick to apologize. And quick to admit when he was wrong, and he was quick to set out to try to make wrongs right with them as they grew into adulthood. And they had a very, very close relationship.
Amen. You don't think you had any part in it though? Huh?
Well, I tell you what, I prayed a lot, and I mentioned earlier today that Chuck and I was on the same page. I may not have always agreed with every rule that he had for them, but they never knew I didn't agree. And when they would come to me, sometimes the girls, because Chuck was very strict, sometimes the girls would come to me and say,
That was a
Daddy
thing.
this or Daddy that. And when they did, I'd say, he's our head, the head of our home. If you don't agree with me, you tell the Lord. And if the Lord changes him, that's to your benefit. But if the Lord doesn't change you, you have no choice but to obey it. And that seemed to settle in their hearts and work very well. And the Bible, every rule that Chuck and I had, we tried to have it based on a scripture in the Bible, because I wanted them to know that it wasn't just my silly idea, or I was wanting to make their life miserable, or, you know, or be a boss or anything like that, but that it was the rules that I had was God's idea. And that if they disobeyed the rule, they were disobeying God.
And I'm thankful for that, because Cheryl to this day calls me Lord. Does whatever I say, and you know, God doesn't change me.
Yeah.
The will of the.
Yeah.
Not behind your back.
All right. Question, go ahead.
Hey, Philip, are you here? You want to unmute yourself? You want to give a comment? We'll see if we can hear you.
Sure. You were talking about transitioning from the teenage years into adulthood and all of that. And for all the years that we've served in ministry, and we started with our kids little, and we applied, train up a child in the way they should go. So everything we were doing, they did with us, going out canvassing and going here and there, working at the church, whatever. But after we moved to California to plant this church, it occurred to me that my boys were quickly becoming men. Now they're 22, 21, and 17. And several years ago, I sat the boys down and I told them, I said, I've been unfair to you because for a few years, because as teenagers and young men, I have not given you the option that I give every other teenage man and adult man in our church. I tell them, serve as much as you want to. I encourage you to serve, but serve to the degree that you want to. And I told my boys, I said, I'm giving you the freedom to choose how, where, and when you want to serve. But if you make a commitment to serve, keep it. And there was a little bit of hesitancy in me whenever I told them that, thinking that maybe they're going to be like, whew, so glad I don't have to do that anymore, but really it's been the opposite. I've had to tell them, no, you can't add something else to your plate. And I'm so grateful for that. My wife has helped so much with that transition and the conversations and understanding and the explanations and everything. And I'm grateful for that, for her influence and their response to that method of training.
Are your sons married?
They are not. They're still in the home with us. And
I have a 23-year-old and a 20-year-old girl.
let's get them. Let's talk. For sure. Yeah.
Business.
Hey,
That's
thanks, Phil.
great, Phil. Thank you. That's so good, man. Hey, you know what? Grace is messy, right? But you can't have grace without permission. So,
I had a
Brian?
question, Mike. So, you think about a lot of great leaders are a bit of rebels at heart. They don't necessarily follow the status quo. They don't really care what people think.
That's
Right
good.
there.
That's good.
There's a, you look at most, there's more ADD CEOs and C student CEOs than A student CEOs. And, I'm a rule follower. I grew up as a rule follower. I like to go through the system, follow the system. And that's not necessarily what produces the best leaders in our world. So we've got an 11-year-old, 11, 9, and 6, and our 11-year-old she's a test the boundaries kind of girl, but she's thoughtful about it and trying to figure out this whole, totalitarianism versus making that transition, but even with our littlest, like our 9-year-olds are rule follower. 6-year-old, Lord have mercy. And so trying to figure out what lessons there are for, like, you want to have that totalitarianism, you want to control, you want to guide and protect, but like, how do you in that process also be intentional about raising leaders and not followers? You know, my wife was a rebel at heart, and she grew up in an independent Baptist fundamental school, charismatic church, but an independent Baptist school. That was a combination. And she was the bad kid. Like, she was absolutely the bad kid. The other kid who was the bad kid got kicked out, and now he's like feeding 9,000 kids a day in Nicaragua, serving as a missionary. Like, I mean, and all the good kids have completely fallen off the wagon. Completely, like literally all of them. And figuring out, like, where's that balance? Because somewhere at the heart of a rebel kid oftentimes is a very thoughtful kid who's trying to figure things out. And I find myself telling my daughter sometimes, no, you stop asking why, or like, you know, shutting that down and maybe not making the transition. On what you said today is going to go, okay, we need to transition sooner, but how do you even do that with the littler ones and find that balance?
Yeah, that's Annabeth you're describing.
It comes with a relationship.
I was going to say
Yeah.
the word that just constantly, and it's kind of a guiding word for me in ministry and pastoring, is authenticity.
Mhm.
Because authenticity gives people the freedom to grow. Legalism, I use that word broadly, it just squelches growth, right? So you're clamping down, feeling like you're actually winning, but you're really losing the future. So obviously the boundary to me, obviously there's boundaries of, you know, just the Bible says things, there's things we do, the Bible says. I think there's boundaries, personal safety. You know, obviously we're not giving up the boundaries there. I think there's the boundaries of just the functioning of the home. You know, you're part of a community, and the community, we have to work together. So there's boundaries you have to have and establish. I'm not by any means releasing boundaries, but within that, just open conversations all the time. I mean, nothing is off the table that we can't talk about in our house. Everything is on the table. And because that's the only way, you know, the privilege, I guess, of being a part of my kids working through these things. No one was doing that for me. You know, I was sitting here figuring out life completely on my own, you know, and, you know, I moved out of our house when I was 16. You know, I was joking, but I was true. I had my first tattoo at 13. I was using heroin at 15. I was moving out of my house at 16, off probation at 18, into the military, and got saved. And man, 20 years old, God just miraculously changed. No one was helping me. And so for me, maybe it's much more, you know, acute to me, the power and the privilege of being able to walk with them through this. It's, you know, that's, man, that's the greatest thing ever. And so just realizing, you know, just that it's a privilege, and I don't know how to, it's just being present, being there, you know, and the messiness of it all. It's just a blessing, you know.
All 4 of our kids love serving in ministry. A couple weeks ago, Mike had an opportunity to be gone on a weekend because we were supposed to be on vacation. And he offered to take Annabeth off somewhere and do something with her. And she flat out told him, I can go Friday and Saturday, but Sunday I have to be at church.
This is the rebel.
Yep. And he said, you can't get somebody to cover for you. Well, it's my responsibility. I'm committed to it, and I need to be there.
And I was the
So-
pastor giving him permission to
Yeah.
bail on it, you know? But I don't know, Ryan, I hope that helped. But it's to me, I'm just thinking it's just that authenticity, just being there, being present, and just, you know,
Yeah.
openness to talk about it, no matter how much uncomfortable it makes you feel. And for those of you who grew up in a more not sheltered, I would say shepherded home, I see it as a good thing. You don't obviously have the contrast that I have, you know, and so that's what's been a good thing with us. My wife trusted Christ at 4 years old and has never looked back, you know, so the balance between us, but, you know, I just, you know, I don't know. You start getting real discouraged with them, give me a call, man. I'll share some of my war stories with you and you'll feel really good about your kids, you know? One second, Lysandra.
So the thought that keeps coming to my mind and what you're talking about, because we dealt a lot with this too, is individualism. Like not saying at 6 years old, we will do this with each child when they turn 6 because they're so.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make my third child like my first child, because my third child is the rebel, my first child is a rule keeper. And so I have to deal with them differently. And my husband has had to deal with our rebel in a totally different way and have conversations with her that we didn't have with my oldest. He was having conversations with her at 4 that we didn't have with my oldest since she was probably 12.
Yeah.
Because they just looked at things differently. The older one didn't need answers. The younger one, she needed them to be able to follow rules. And I think it's also really important as parents not to be afraid of the why, like when they ask why, because I oftentimes will finish our conversations with, do you understand why? If you don't understand why, let's talk about this a little more. Or try to get them to repeat the why to me, so that we can make sure that we understand each other before, because they're not going to be able to move forward if they can't get past that.
Okay. Mom, you wanted to say one thing, you get the last word.
No, I just wanted to say that we had hours of devotion.
Hours.
And there, seriously, because there was nothing that they couldn't talk about or wasn't discussed. And my husband hated to have to bring out what a homosexual was and different issues like that, but he dealt with them and there was nothing that they couldn't discuss and talk about.
No, this authentic conversation. It's awesome. All right, cool. I guess that's it. We out of time? Evaluations. Okay, so in your booklet on breakout 4, there's evaluation. There's a QR code. You can just kind of right there and just give the input on this session. Hey, thanks guys for joining us today. I love these. It's just conversation and, you know, if nothing else, we're all encouraged that we're all, man, less than perfect and just doing the best we can. So.
For those of you joining online, thanks for tuning in. We'll be live from Chicago next week. See you guys. You guys have a good week.